All right, well, welcome to another Reeducation Experience podcast with me, your host. Today, we finally turn from solo episode as of late to bringing on a guest. And actually, our guest today is setting off a string of more guests. And I can't wait to have on here for the summer weeks to come. So today's guest is someone, as we were talking offline, I really enjoyed watching and learning from over the last few years, honestly. And her content caught my attention. And it's not easy to do in this world because there's a lot of things that are coming at us, as you know, but caught my attention, held my attention. And I just continued to want to lean in and just wait for her next piece of content. So again, hard to do. Our guest today, you may not know because she's not in the real estate space at all, but I know I actually snuck in to see who follows you. And I'm like, there's a lot of realtors out there following you, whether you know this or not. It's because of the coolness to your content. So we just met today for the first time offline outside of her DMs, which I hit up. And it's Heather. Heather, is it Parady?
Parody. Yeah, just like a
Perfect.
joke.
Yes. So not a realtor, um, but
I
she
bought a
also
house. Does
runs.
that count? I'm a consumer of realtors. I don't know.
There you go. There you go. Uh, Heather's a combination of things. Um, and passions from what I'm learning. The further I kind of like prepare for these interviews. So
Mm,
fractional COO,
hmm
very interesting. That's kind of you run your consulting business,
hmm
helping businesses. It seems like just who need help carrying projects ahead, executing on things. And is that fair to say?
Yeah, so we work with service providers who are
Mm,
providing some kind of tangible service out in the world, and they're really, really good at it. And they're entering into the digital space and don't either know how nor have the bandwidth to translate what they're doing in real life to digital. So I have a periodontist that I work with. I was telling you, I have commercial real estate space. I have a lot of therapists. I tracked a lot of therapists, people who were providing one-on-one service, but they're like, hey, I have a course, I have a membership. I need to figure out how to scale some of my efforts. We come in and help them with that.
gotcha. So that is not how I came across her. That's not
No,
where,
most people don't.
Heather and I connected. She's also an amazing podcast host herself, and her podcast, for those listening, go find it. It's Unconventional Leaders podcast. The guests you've been able to have are amazing. And again,
Thank
people I've
you.
heard of, and then people I hadn't, but then I went and followed after the conversations you've had. So super envious of the guest list. So Seth Godin, Jack Canfield, Kent King. That was a new one I'd never heard of. I loved what you guys had. Rachel, and there's so many others within a lot of industries. So, I mean, amazing. Love what you do. But this is also not how I came across you. As an avid listener was not the podcast, it was actually your social media content where somehow
Mm,
you ended up in my feed. And the thing I wanted right away was to have you on here was the thought, the detail, the work you put in, the creativity that you explore in this stuff. That I mean, maybe the whole shebang of your social media content is just awesome. So again, right off the top here, it's at Heather Parady. It's Parady. So you'll be hooked just like me. So for those of my realtor folks, we're always looking for somebody different. We're always looking to try to put out content that's different. And I
really
think you'll love
interesting.
what Heather's putting out. So, but yeah, but none of these three things are your original background, right?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Like you went to school for something totally different. Can you kind of
Yeah.
cover that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Darren, thank you for your kind words. I mean, anyone who is building something, you're building your brand, you're putting out content, it's so much work and it's fun and it's awesome and I love it, obviously. But there's so much behind the scenes that goes into it. I know you know this. And so it means a lot that you saying that because damn, there's a lot of hours. You know what I mean? Um, no, originally never thought I would go to school or do anything like professionally for the most part. I really struggled academically and kind of came from a area where women get married and they become youth pastors' wives, which is nothing wrong with that, but at all. I think it's super honorable. But I just didn't have a lot of options on the table other than go into ministry and be a stay-at-home wife. And you couple that with no education. I think my last grade that I finished was seventh. And just a lot of insecurity, a lot of imposter syndrome. But someone presented me this idea. They're like, "Hey, if you really, want to contribute something, you should learn." And I had a real huge fear of learning because I felt super stupid. I ended up going to school, had to enter into like developmental classes and really just build from the ground up. And I learned quickly that it really wasn't innate talent, and it wasn't something you're born with. It's a lot of work, and that if you're determined, you can figure it out. So I went to YouTube school. I cannot tell you, YouTube got me through everything. I literally went there, every paper, every math equation, everything to figure out how to do this thing. Ended up picking psychology as my major because I love people and I love like deep conversations. Ended up going to grad school, got my license there, got like four different job offers leaving to be a therapist. And I remember sitting in the room about to go in for an interview for a job I got and crying. Like I was literally had tears in my eyes because I did not want to be there. I didn't want to do this. And it wasn't therapy, it was restriction. I didn't want somebody to tell me to be at job at 8 a.m. How dramatic is that? They're like, you have to be here 8 to 4. And I'm like, what? Because I had built a business on the side, a photography business, and I did really well with it. I got to travel. I traveled to multiple different states taking photos and got to make money on my own terms. And I was like, damn, there's something to building something on your own.
Mhm.
The long story short, yeah, I was a therapist for like half a second, but ended up quitting that really before it began. And I didn't know what to do. So I knew that there was this thing called the internet. I knew that I was scrappy. And what I learned from school is that I might be the dumbest person, quote, quote, in the room, but I'm way freaking more determined and stubborn than most people. And you'll see that through my content. You'll see that through most of the stuff I've built. It hasn't been pretty. I've messed up a lot. I have put in hundreds of thousands of hours into what I do. Not that it takes most people that time, it takes me that much time. So anything that I've quote accomplished comes with a trail, my friend, of mistakes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like we should almost throw you into real estate.
Why not? Let's add it to the resume.
You know, so the realtor profession, and like you said, you have a client in commercial real estate. We call like the commercial
Mhm.
real estate kind of like the big boys and girls club, and it's a very tight, big circle. And then
Is it
the
really? Okay.
residential realtors, we're all these little independent contractors,
Yeah.
almost like again, we're playing in the smaller price points, but that's why I say big boys, girls club. But it's more of an open season. The big commercial
Mm,
realtors, they really lock down a lot of the controls, but us as little realtors, little residential guys, we're building our own little marketing machines. We're
totally.
running everything ourselves, lead generation, marketing, sales, administration, kind of like as you're
Mhm.
building your business out. So it's
Mhm.
like, yeah, these realtors, we all wear like a zillion hats. And like we talked offline, this content game that you found yourself, like I think what I've heard you say over and over again is you really love the creativity side of that.
Yeah.
And it's like it seems to propel a lot of what you do. I don't know if realtors are the same, right? We come from a lot of different places, and generally creativity isn't the one. Mostly it's about people and relationships, but because of social media these days, that creativity, that side, that really needs to unleash something that is of interest to capture the
Mhm.
scroll seems to be what we have no choice but to figure out if you want social media to be your world. I mean, when you dove into the social stuff, um, walk me through the beginning part of the journey, like some of the stumble trips and a couple of the kind of how you started to do what you do. Was Instagram the first platform for you when you started going? Was it YouTube, or did you go right into audio, into podcasting?
Before I answer that question, let me address what you said a minute ago about this whole, you know, reluctance towards the creative conversation. Everything I'm about to say will not matter nor make sense unless you open up your heart and your mind a little bit to your own potential and what you actually have in you. I'm not going to sit here and teach you how to some formula, or I mean, I can give you what's worked for me and
Sure.
give you some tips and tricks and stuff. But what's really interesting to me is how many, I was just last week, speaking to a bunch of really successful entrepreneurs who have built scalable businesses, and they're like, I'm not creative. And it's this weird narrative. I think we have this weird association with, like, oh, I need to be some, music producer or art, physical paint artist. That's not it. Is all you have to do is build connections with points that wouldn't normally go together,
Mm,
and ask yourself different questions than most people. And I would argue, Darren, that that skill set will not only help you with your content, that's going to help you with your business. It's going to help you with lead generation. It's going to make you a better partner and a friend. If we can practice learning to build connections in our mind and ask ourselves different questions. So that's all it really is. Okay.
that's an interesting take. Build connections with points that wouldn't normally go
Normally go
together.
together. You're finding associations. What I think the real issue is with people entering into the creativity thing is it's a call to be vulnerable and to
Right.
be judged. And that's the aversion against it. It's not that you don't have ideas. It's not that you don't have a silly side or a quote creative side or a way to explain something. It's not that you're not a storyteller. It's, damn, that means that I'm going to have to put myself out there in a way that the other realtors aren't.
Right.
And I'm opening myself up to be critiqued and rejected. You know what I'm saying?
100% do. Yeah. I mean, we have like the rubbernecking on the highway when the accident's on the other side, and for some reason it slows down the other side of the road. Realtors are constantly looking around and be like, "Oh, that's really cool," or "That's really it. I got to do this." And we are
Mm-hmm.
probably, I'm going to say we're the worst of this to try to like replicate something we're not, because there's so many of us kind of polluting the social media space with content that
Mm-hmm.
that is one of these things that we get caught in this. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do you handle that? Did you have any of that getting into this world?
I mean, I still do. I don't know if that's ever anything that you quote overcome. I think it's a matter of trying to constantly evaluate that and challenging myself to be better, and like I said before, not limiting what I bring to the table, because that's really what we're doing. We're saying,
Right.
I have to minimize myself to become a clone of someone else versus I really believe I have something to add here. I have something to say, that there's a space for me here. Um,
I love that. Like the I have the belief line is like one that you can sink on for a bit, right? And I think is kind of what you're
yeah.
saying is something that we probably don't spend enough time in, right?
And that's why you said earlier, like, you've been really drawn to the creative part. It's not because I'm innately creative and I really don't have a talent. Like, I don't. I'd say this all the time, and people are like, oh, you're being hard on yourself. And I'm like, no, really, I'm a horrible singer. I am terrible. I can't draw. I don't have, like, I can't stand when people go to those little artsy things and have to paint a picture. And you spend $40 with this, like, a art me, whatever the hell it's called. I can't stand, like, I don't do that. But it's the reason I'm so fascinated with this conversation is because it's actually one of finding your voice in your soul and your spirit and figuring out, how do I bring that forth? Because people aren't going to be drawn to your content because you have some cool hack or trend or whatever. They're drawn to your content because they see someone who's lit up and they're attracted to.
Right.
People, there no people don't say to me, "Oh, Heather, I like your content because you use this book and this weird transition and this editing effect." They go, "I love your personality."
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying? So it's figuring out what's the container to really show who Darren is.
totally.
That's all it is. You know what I'm saying? So I don't even remember what you asked. I'm getting all fired up.
No, but that's what I asked, and how you answered is better than what I asked in the first place. So we're
I'm a terrible first guest. I'm
no,
like, what'd you
no.
ask?
First guess in a while, but yes.
Yeah.
You also said something. I don't know whose podcast it was. I think you might have been a guest on someone else's show, one of your friends. Um, and you said something about like we don't know our voice until we try a few things sometimes and just like figure out what fits. That
Hmm.
that is like me. Okay, finally. But can you walk through that concept a little bit where it's
You
just like
find
until
your
you put enough
voice.
out there,
Yeah.
you kind of learn like what's pretend and what's not. Is that fair?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So imagine, when you have a kind of sore throat or you lost your voice, you've been sick for a little while, the first few sounds that come out is scratchy and you sound like a crazy person. And it's over the next few days of you using your voice that your voice becomes clearer and clearer. What we do as creators, and it's so, man, like, listen, it's understandable. I say this all the time to people. If you really think about it, I'm 37. I am the first quote person, my generation is the first to go through what it means to be a human on the internet. Our parents didn't grow up with an Instagram and a TikTok account. Of course, this is weird. We're the first people figuring this out. This isn't a human thing to record yourself and put it on the internet where Jack Black could watch it at some point. Like, this is
Right.
weird stuff that we do. Of course, it feels weird, but so many people approach the conversation of what app should I use? What editing software do you have? What should I talk about? They're looking for a structure to help propel them without wrestling with that voice part of that scratchy voice. And the reason is we don't want to come out of the gate as a beginner. We don't want to be embarrassed.
Totally.
You have to be willing to be humiliated and be embarrassed and feel the frustration. And most folks don't want to do that. So you find your voice by using your voice. You have to put in those reps. And the thing is nobody gives a rat's ass anyway. Like, nobody's paying attention. We put ourselves in our own little jail, you know?
Totally. I love that again. I wrote down, of course, this is weird. And it's like that frame of reference is actually really powerful. It's like
Mm-hmm.
all of this is just has never had to been done before. And if you choose to play this game, and there's a lot of realtors that don't do social media and they can make incredible income and they don't even have
Yeah.
to play there because of the relationship side of this business. But those that do play, oftentimes we go about it, I think, in the wrong way too. Not only potentially are we not sharing our authentic self, like you talked about, and like getting our voice out there, but we're doing the social game as an intention that I think is misaligned. And let me walk you through this and let me
Yeah.
get your take on it. I think of social as two ways. One of them is this ability to grow. Social gives me this ability to reach more people. We're like, this is amazing. As a realtor, more people that could be buyers and sellers or investors. But then there's what about just to reach the people that I already know and they trust me, just to a much easier path to show more of me than I've ever been able to show.
Mm.
So there's like maintenance, I call it, like relationships, and then growth. But most realtors think social, they think content, like you and I just shared, and they think, well, growth means viral. Growth
Mm.
means trend. Growth means something's got to catch. I just wish realtors would flip it and say, grow, let's not talk growth yet. Let's just find the voice with the people that I already know. And let's
Yes.
keep them in my web for a while. Let's
Oh,
keep
I
them in
love
my
it.
big warm online hug
Yeah.
for 5 to 7 years between them buying houses. If you can do that, you're going to win the game. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? If I,
You nailed it. You
well, there you
nailed
go.
it. I think that is such a cool philosophy, and that's the grounded approach to really create something meaningful. And I'm sure you've heard me harp about this before. I'm really passionate right now about creating a body of work over chasing virality because we're always looking for, oh my God, I've got to, like, something's got to pop, something's got to hit. And coming from someone who's gone viral, several times, it doesn't mean anything
Right.
without a body of work, but we're so like it's the shiny sexy thing of like, oh, I'm going to get a lot of followers, but if you aren't building the depth, you know what I'm saying, like if that's
Yeah.
not converting to whatever your goal is, what are we doing here besides just like a big ego dopamine fest?
Yeah. That body of work thing is nice because I think it ties into something you shared as well, where you're like, you earn most of your cash, I think, from consulting and like the COO world. Is that fair
Oh,
still at this point?
100%. Yes.
And then this body of work, which we see if we're on your site and we've seen all the work you and energy you put in, is for almost a different purpose. Is that right? Can you share like how like what you see there is not the consulting COO person.
Hmm.
It's almost like this, I think you mentioned in something, your future, this future like podcaster, massive host, this host of like
Yeah.
extraordinaire, where it's like that's who you see yourselves and that's who you're putting a lot of your online energy to. Is that right?
Yeah. So I kind of approach content differently. For me, that's the end game. I'm a communicator. I love creating content. Content changed my life. I mean, I told you the background that I came from. The reason things shifted for me is people who had the courage. Is that Outwitting the Devil behind you?
It is, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's so badass. That's a great book. Sorry, massively distracted. Um, having voices in my ear that gave me a different narrative changed my life. And I want to do the same thing for other people. Now, that sounds cool, but it is really, really hard. God, that's a bad narrative. It's a path. It's to figure out how to make that profitable. So I always say to people, I'm entrepreneurial. I figure out how to make money to give myself space to create. And
Mm,
so this COO stuff is a temporary thing that I'm really good at and I love doing. And all my clients know it's a temporary thing that I'm doing right now to give me the bandwidth to create content. So I love this idea. And I don't remember who presented it, but it's this idea of speaking as if and operating as if. So instead of saying like, oh, one day XYZ, it's like, what would I do 10 years from now? How am I creating a space for that now? So for me, the content is Heather in 10 years where I'm making my full income off of that. And I am already operating like that. I have a full VA who does everything with media. I don't make hardly anything with it. So I'm paying. I'm that's an expense that I have.
yeah.
I spend at least 20 hours a week just on content. Do I get paid for that? I mean, indirectly, I mean, people find me and I could say that 100%, but I'm planting seeds for something long term because I take this very, very seriously. And this is something that I'm going to do with my life. Um, so I don't again know if I answered your question or not. And I don't want to like detour people from that. It's not like you have to go that heavy and deep. Again, that's my goal. But the indirect response of that is I get emails every week. Every week. I don't know exactly what you do, but can I hire you?
Right.
I've had speaking opportunities, some cool ones. I've had, monthly retainer clients come in. I've gotten to meet people like you, like being able to connect with just awesome people, not because I have a hard CTA and I'm selling everybody, but because I'm providing a space to transmit my energy where this is Heather,
Yeah.
and people are attracted to that. Some people aren't. Some people aren't. But
We
that's
won't
the
talk
vibe
about
of
them.
it.
Yeah.
No, I got a spot for them on my website. I have a whole page to that. It's awesome. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. This conversation, part of this conversation is so darn relevant to the agents listening because again, we're like trying to figure out what it is our in our content wheel. What is it, the
Mm,
thing that we're supposed to be sharing? And like we've unpacked this and this concept of speaking as if. I just got off of a call before this with one of our junior agents, and he's got that imposter syndrome. What do I do? What do I share? And we try to unpack this all the time. And if you that frame of reference, most of these agents are trying to build a business that's a little more substantial, a little more income, probably higher sale prices. Like things like that are pretty typical
mhm.
because of course it lends itself to being more time with family, better return on
Sure.
your energy. So this is like who I am in 5 years, 2 years, as if I had sold, 20 homes as a new
Yes.
agent
Yes.
already is such a great again frame that you've been able to kind of lay out for people to just jump into and almost embrace. And when I heard
Mhm.
that from you, it did feel like it was such a great thing that I wanted you to like mention, and I'm glad you did. So can we unpack a little bit of your style, like
Yes.
your
Oh.
current Instagram reel style for those who haven't watched? Can you it is so fun to watch. You're pulling in like this really fun hook. You've got a great personality. You've got, yes, it's professionally shot, but you've got, you're pulling clips from other folks. It's even multiple different like
Mhm.
places, it seems, on every post. And
Mhm.
then you've got this really fun, witty ender every time. Can you walk us through that a little bit? Because I think I
Yeah.
haven't seen it anywhere else.
Thank
Um,
you.
and it comes across so damn well that I thought, I was like, let's just play there a little bit if you don't mind.
Yeah. So it starts with a really important practice that I encourage everyone to do no matter what style of content you're putting out is this practice called homework for life. It's from Matthew Dick's Storyworthy. And it's this idea that you collect ideas every day.
Mm,
Back to the I'm not creative bullcrap. As creators, and we're all creators, we are creating right now in this moment something. You are creating. Practicing the awareness of paying attention to the micro parts of your day is foundational for creating content because there's so many little nuggets, there's so many different analogies, there's so many different examples, and what we've done is we're overstimulated and we're productivity machines, so we're running through our day as fast as we can without stopping and paying attention to these small moments. That is gold for content. So Matthew Dix teaches homework for life. And so at the end of the day, you ask yourself, if I were to tell a story about today, what would I tell? And it's not some big grandiose story. It's like earlier, my daughter came up to me, true story, and she said, "Hey, feel my muscle, mommy," because she's been lifting some weights and stuff. So I pushed on it and it was a little wobbly and it was so cute. And I was just thinking about her belief and what she saw versus what I saw and how much powerful it was what she saw in the mirror and that she onboarded me to her muscles because of her conviction. You know what I mean? And so it's these small little things throughout our day that we've got to shift our mind around. So it starts there. I have an idea spreadsheet.
yeah.
Now, here we go. Got in the spreadsheets. It's about to get nerdy, but
I
literally
was an
just,
engineer before this, so I'll track
dude,
with you on this.
I want a shirt that says spreadsheets are sexy. If y'all will come up with that, I will buy it from you. Um, but it's just this idea of getting in the habit of capturing ideas. So even with, and I'm going to get really in the details here, but I'm at the gym, I'm in a road trip, I hear a podcast, I hear a really cool quote. I'll capture that quote in this spreadsheet. For me, for this content style, what it does is I have a bank now of ideas. So if I want to create a piece of content around imposter syndrome, I can type in imposter syndrome in my idea spreadsheet. And here's a podcast I heard about it the other day. Here's this analogy that I thought about with my kid imposter syndrome. And I have all these ideas. Remember earlier when I said creativity is just drawing lines between
Yeah, yeah.
stuff and building bridges and connecting? I think where we miss it with content creation is we start with, if you're watching on YouTube, I'm holding up a beautiful thing that my kids made me for Mother's Day. It's this yarn arrangement flower thing. This may mean a lot to me, right? I have context for this piece of art my daughters made me. This is my baby's artwork. But if I show you, Darren, this, you're not going to have the same emotional attachment to me as I do, right?
Yeah.
So, as creators, we need to think about I might care about my business, my city, my houses, this and that, and this and that, but we're not putting it in a vehicle that other people care about and presenting it to them through the lens of something that matters to them. So, what I start with is these ideas in the books that I love. I don't start there. I'm an avid reader. I'll read a quote in a book and I'll just like, oh my God, that's so good. I don't start there. I start with a concept or a pop culture icon or something that somebody else cares about. And I lead with that. And then I tie it back into the thing that I'm trying to get across. So, my ideas spreadsheet, I have those. I build these connections. I go to writing. This is really important. I don't think no one, I think I've said this a million times, but no one asks me about writing. No one does. They ask me how I edit it, they ask me what camera I use. No one has ever asked about my writing process. That's the most important part. So I write it, and there's a whole bunch there we could talk about.
Sure.
Then go into filming. I film everything myself. And then I edit everything myself. And that's really important for me because to me, the edit is a huge part of the storytelling. But the whole premise of the content is I start with a strong hook somebody cares about, tie it back into what's on my heart. And then I usually add some kind of improv funny thing because that's just who I am.
I like that. I mean, everybody, you look anywhere and people are talking, oh, we need the hook, we need the hook, we need the hook. And that make it's universal, right? We need, if
Mhm.
we're not hooking something that somebody else cares about, we're going to miss them. So all the extra work that you do to create the rest would go nowhere. So then you go straight to your heart after that. Is that right? So you
Mhm.
go hook them in a sense, something
Mhm.
makes, let's follow somebody's standard practice for hooking. And then you go boom, right into the heart. Could
Yep.
you give, a- I mean, give me an example of that. Is there something that like rings a bell recently about like, how that transition works, because that seems interesting, um, rather than right to like problem solving or or
Yeah, so I was just on a call before this and someone said, and I'm stealing it. It was so good. He was talking about there's the logical truth and then there's the vibrational truth. So I can hit you with a bunch of knowledge, but if I'm not energetically connecting with you on some human level, you're just noise.
mm, I
I
love it.
mean, we can get information, chat, freaking BT it, PT it, whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's so much freaking information. What stands out now is that little point where you show a level of humanity, and I can see myself in you, Darren. So, what you're looking for is, yeah, you want to add value, people bring people into your business, but they're going to get sold when they feel like they know who you are. And that goes back to the vulnerability piece. It's like, okay, if I'm going to share, can you give me an example of something that you would share on a piece of content as a realtor?
I mean, so we're always, I mean, there's general like market information, but the things that more resonate would be like some type of experience sharing that you just went through a home or you just found a problem or you just got some age, some client surmounted this big obstacle and was able to get approved for their first house, and you might share it. Um, so realtors are bad at sharing the right things because they mostly share just sold, just listed, open houses, price
Ah,
drops, and
yeah,
and that's good for their ego and good for their mother's ego, but like
it
nobody
doesn't
else.
work. It
Yeah,
doesn't
but
work.
but there's a lot of teaching moments in real estate because we're out and about, daily in the world of real estate. Homes have gone up, homes have gone down. There's a shortage here, there's a problem here. The community just released this, bylaws have changed. So like
Right.
there's a teaching element that I think a lot of us try to get across, but I try to share that I don't believe you should be speaking to the audience as if they're looking to buy or sell. We should be serving the audience as if they're not looking to buy or sell and hope they stay with you for the next 10 years.
Amen. Oh, that's so, man, people need to listen to you, Darren. That's some good wisdom. That's holla, holla, holla. I was just telling somebody earlier today on another interview that we're so sick of the way content's been done in the marketing business space. Like you can just smell it.
Yeah,
That's hard CTA. If you're good, people are going to seek you out to work with you. So we've got to figure out how do we become really good at the storytelling piece and the human
right.
connection piece. And I think with the examples that you used, if you think about a hero's journey, when you watch
Mhm.
a movie, if it's like Frodo was like killing it the whole time and had the hot girlfriend and there was no ring and all of that, we wouldn't watch it. It's the valleys and the dip that we see ourselves in. So I'm not saying make every reel into a sob story by any means, but how can you bring a little bit of the, like if I'm, you know, and I know you can't maybe have the liberty to do this with the client, but if they've been looking forever and they have, the mom's a homeschool mom and, it's been such a struggle finding the right place, like adding that narrative of the struggle in there is so important. Finding examples from your own life, or maybe you grew up with a single mom and you understand what it feels like to not have a house or not have a home. And maybe I remember going into the bedroom one time There was a point in my life where I didn't have a place to live, and remember the first room that I walked into, and I felt safe and I felt like I had somewhere at one point. And I'll never forget that. I was like 19. Um, and going back to that moment of knowing what it felt like to not have a place and then going to feel like I'm safe now,
Right.
like that's what we connect with. You know what I mean? But
Totally.
again, that takes some vulnerability.
Totally.
That takes a lot of vulnerability.
Yeah. I mean, think of, I mean, I don't know in your market, but the realtor's business is high flash, sexy
Yeah,
car.
exactly. Uh-huh.
And it's just like polish. And some of us are breaking that mold, but man, in general, it's that way. Um, there's a friend of mine down in the South, and I can't remember where she lives. Her motto in real estate was, I don't sell houses, I help people transition through their biggest life moments.
Woo.
I
Come
was
on.
like, oof, and I still get goosebumps on my arm when I see that. And I think that might actually personify in one word, like what you're just talking about, right? It's just like we are in a luxury in this business to sell not widgets. We're
Mm,
selling life. Like you don't buy and sell a house unless a big life change is going to happen,
mm,
right? Like you just got
mm.
married, you just had a kid, someone just passed away. You're buying your first place because you got your first job. Like these are huge, right?
Yeah.
So like there's a story in all of that. And that's what kind of like this hero's journey moment is like find those things. And there's so many ways to not disclose personal things
Oh,
out
so
to the
many.
world, right? There's
I
so
mean, how
many
many
ways.
personal things do you feel like you know about me and you've consumed a lot of my content? I feel like I'm very personal and I don't share like a ton of stuff. I'm very protective over my girls for just not that I don't want to share them all over the internet. There's just personal reasons I don't, but I try to be very, very personal. I want to give a mindset shift that I hope is helpful. When you think about creating from a place of trying to prove something or impress someone versus creating from a place of I genuinely want someone's life to be better because they watch this piece of content,
Right.
it's so different. And that sounds dramatic, but I have been the recipient of content that's changed my life. I don't need anything from you. I don't need you to sign up with me. I don't need you to buy from me at all. I just want you to leave a little better after consuming something that I made.
Hmm. That's uh, if somebody was like going through their ideation, like you talked about trying to connect the dots, come up with their voice, and if they had the words on the top of their screen that says better because of dot dot
Yeah.
dot, that alone would be a pretty powerful frame. I love that.
Yeah.
So you're, and again, back to what you said earlier that I caught, which is like you get those emails weekly and they're like,
Mm-hmm.
just want to hire you
Mm-hmm.
because I like you. And it's just like, what are you selling? Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's so amazing that like that type of stuff. And that's very, again, that becomes our world in real estate too, because when somebody's ready, and if you're sharing your proper stuff, and there's always going to be built-in real estate stuff because we're on the go and
Yeah.
it's pretty hard not to know a realtor's in real estate. You know what I
Right.
mean? Because
Right.
they're
Right.
they're in
Right.
and out of houses. That's exactly the business you want, right? It's the come list me business. It's the Darren, I've been following you for years. I haven't said a peep. And that would only happen if your posts are
Mm.
better because of is basically what I'm thinking.
Amen.
I
Preach.
love it. You've got unconventional leaders. When I thought about that for the first time, I was like, saw in your content, and then I saw unconventional leaders. And I was like, okay, in my head, it was a flip. I was trying to figure out the connection. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
is this just for like CEOs and like COOs and like that at first, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then I heard you say something that I thought was pretty cool. It's like you say that leadership and the way you're trying to go about your message is think of it in the context of influence. Is that a
Mm-hmm.
little bit right? How there's like when you think leaders, it's more like just like the influence that you're able to make. Is that right? A little bit more so than like leadership, true take.
CEOs and all that. That's just not my vibe. I love that. It's just not my world. I can't even go on LinkedIn, dude. Like it's the worst. My style is it's just different. When I entered into this space, I mentioned you earlier, personal development, like literally saved my life. I just went and consumed all the podcasts I could, looking up the stuff, and it was just this one kind of brand. It was like this salesperson, CEO, corporate leadership stuff, which is fire. That's so cool. And like I said, it changed my life. But I started just thinking, like, what if we saw leadership in what we were creating and took it a little more seriously in the opportunity there? Because there are some people, man, I would argue. My wedding photographer in Little Rock, Arkansas, he has built a massive, cool brand. He's a photographer, and that man has influence in my community. He uses his voice. Um, it's not about photos for him. There's a whole thing there. You cannot tell me that man, as a photographer, is not a huge leader in that community. What we do is we dumb down like our position and what we're bringing to this world. Because like, oh, I'm just a real estate agent. Oh, I'm just a stay-at-home mom. Oh, I'm just this. I'm just that. Without taking ownership of the leadership that we have within our positions. So, unconventional leaders originally was just birthed to bring another side to leadership that was a little unbuttoned and start seeing the contribution that we're making in what we're making in the variety that is. So that's where it started. I've ended up lately a little more into the creative space and really advocating for storytelling creativity because I'm convinced that's leadership. Um, and yeah, it's just a quirky, weird little show.
I like it because, again, if for the agent that would listen to this and have liked the conversation so far, they go over, they see unconventional leadership, and then I want them to think the way you want to. Then is like that local leader, and in us in real estate, we tend to be the hub to like
Mm,
we're the hub to the spokes, like because a lot of
mm,
people come to realtors for the mortgage connection or for the
mm-hmm,
this and for the that, and if we do that well as realtors, we have influence within our circle, right?
mm-hmm.
Which then in your case is saying, well, that means you're in leadership, and I want you to kind of bear that. And that is really cool. And leadership is unconventional. It's not the way you thought because you jumped away from the C-suite or the corporate ladder to be a leader in your org. Think about yourself as a leader within your little org, and it's because you're able to build that influence. And I think it's all wraps together with what you're talking about. Um, so what ultimately right now, where's the starting point for your content? Is it here on podcast land, and then that opens up the door to things like YouTube and then the social, or are they all independent? Do you start with the social ideas and these cool catchy things and then you expand them into podcast guests? Tell me kind of which direction do you go, or do you just kind of play in all of them independently?
I've started seeing them independently. So I have, for me, it's my two pillars is the podcast and then short form content, which is primarily housed on Instagram. Um, and I was talking to somebody about this earlier today, and it's a real mind like set shift. It's just different. I used to think about like, you record all this long form content and you're gonna like repurpose it to other channels and all that stuff. And for me, that didn't really work.
Right.
I made a lot of content. I've put out, you know, hundreds of episodes with different shows I've hosted and hundreds of videos, and repurposing and just kind of half-assing putting out like a billboard, I'm just going to put out this content here. It didn't work for me.
Right.
So I see them as separate entities and see how one can serve the other. So right now, to share about my podcast, there's not a hard call to action. I don't say, listen now on Unconventional Leaders podcast. If it fits, like I had a guest the other day who wasn't too happy with me because they wanted a chair reel. Now people are like, can I have a chair reel? And I said, I'll put you in the list, but unless part of this narrative fits into my narrative, it could be a month from now. It could be never, you know but it's there, like the short form video stands alone whether you listen to my podcast or not. Now it does help serve the podcast because people find the podcasts through there, um, but I have to keep them separate because to me right now content is about context and really building a little story in that one piece. And so if you think about what we said earlier, if it stands alone by itself and it has legs, they're going to come find out more about you.
Right.
If it's like incomplete or if it's half-assed or something, it's just going to get thrown away. But how can I make this one piece stand alone? And again, that's most people don't want to do that. It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. Yeah.
A lot of work.
How many, like when somebody's going to check out your stuff, especially from an agent who's probably not super strong at editing, and they're going to see the cuts and the transitions and then the
Mhm,
clips you find from the
mhm,
past and then you find another clip and then there's another
mhm.
like how long does that typically take you? Just like out of reference.
I spend, like I said, about 20 hours a week.
Okay.
So one reel, I usually write three 3 hours ish a week. Um, I film for a couple of hours, and then the rest of the time is usually spent editing. So that's loose.
Mhm,
But here's the dealio. The reason I do that is not because you need to do that.
mhm,
I've told you before, I want to create content, period. Like I love it. I'm writing my first script right now. I planning on filming that myself. It's probably gonna suck, but I want to learn film. I really enjoy it. I like editing. You do not need to do any of that.
sure.
What you need to learn how to do is tell a great story. And if you have a freaking flip phone with a fuzzy camera and no app downloaded to your phone, but you kill it with your energy and with your storytelling, you could knock the socks out of somebody like me who spends that much time in the post. It has nothing to do with that. Most people don't want to spend time writing a narrative. That's everything.
That makes a lot of sense. So when you say writing, so when I again going back to the reels, 60-second reel, cute, catchy things pulling us through, like every one of yours I'll watch over and over again because they're just nailed. And again, to do a 60-second reel, you probably have what, 200 words max, maybe even 100 words. Like it's not a lot of
Yeah,
words,
less.
but
Yeah.
you're spending that much energy to come. And then is that mostly unpacking, because you're doing this in a 60-second snippet,
Hmm.
how to get clarity to the message that you're trying to relay that's in your heart? Is that kind of, is that what takes is just to really fine tune it to down to something that can fit into
Yeah.
a short piece? Is that where most of
Yeah.
the energy is?
Yeah, I interviewed Renee Rodriguez. He's a communications coach, global speaker, whatever, and he told me that he actually charges people more money for shorter speeches because it
Mm,
takes more work to say things in less time, and it's so true. I'll give you a really important tip that's been helpful for me when you think about writing and hooks is if you take give me a hook that you might use in real estate, a topic.
it could be as simple as like 6 things to get your house ready to sell, right? Or like, something like that. They're just like, or
6 things to get your house ready to sell. Okay. I mean, that's pretty a good hook off the bat. But if I were to just dissect that even more, if you write down your hook on a piece of paper, 6 things to get your house to sell, is that what you said?
6 things to prepare your home for sale, or
6 things to prepare your home for sell. So that's 8 words. If I were to write that down on a piece of paper and I were to look at those 8 words, there's 2 things to ask myself. One, is there a word I can get rid of?
Mhm.
Which I would argue in that hook, probably not.
That
But
one's
here's
pretty
some
tight.
here's some words to get rid of. Most people say, "Hey y'all,
Mm.
got my coffee this morning, and I have something to share with you." Do you really need that? No. So what can you delete off the top? Then you ask yourself, what is the most searchable words in this sentence? So searchable, thinking people are looking for these words put together. So sell your house, I'm guessing,
Right.
would be the quote searchable term there. How can I move sell your house as close to the beginning of that sentence as possible? And the reason is when you think about a hook has what do they say 3 seconds to capture somebody's attention.
Yeah.
It takes you 3 seconds to say 2 words or three
Right.
words, right? So you want to put those really important words at the very top. So you gave me a pretty good hook, but
Yeah. Yeah.
is there a way for me to say, um, sell your home at the top and frame it, here are 6 ways. That's terrible, but you
Right.
hear what I'm saying. And the reason is one, the tension, but also two, um, these platforms are switching to more of a search-based model where the way that Google has been ran, social media is being ran too.
Right.
So we're framing everything in searchable ways. So if you can just really work on that as a content creator, your content's going to do so much better, just that one thing.
Totally. And so much more about like it's not about volume, and it's just like don't just do it for the sake of putting out content. If you hear what Heather's saying is just take the time when you've got a true message to give of value. It's okay if it's not at the same cadence as
Yeah.
Johnny, other realtor who's just putting out something half-assing it every other day, and you just
Yeah.
say, you know, what I mean, again, I think you're right. As the platforms transition to search, more of the proper preparation will matter. I think, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like thinking through those hooks, thinking through the search, thinking through the terms rather than just quantity, 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 right?
Totally. And then as far as the creative element to make yourself stand out a little bit more and get out of the mimic thing, if you can ask yourself, what doesn't normally go here? What is the opposite of what everybody else is doing? So, like for me, the opposite for me was I'm pulling out Jim Rohn quotes and Tony Robbins quotes and Eckhart Tolle, like some deep ass spiritual personal development stuff, and I'm matching it with like Lady Gaga. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
it's this weird matchy stuff, and I think that's what helps make it stand out a little bit. And so this is where the play comes in a little bit. It's like, okay, I see all these other realtors, doing this one traditional post. Instead of me trying to figure out how to make that exact same thing, would what wouldn't make sense here? What's
Mm.
something completely different that I could do? And creative restriction is really helpful if you can think about how can I limit my options of what I can do because you find yourself being more creative. And so for me, sitting in that chair is a creative restriction because I can't get up out of it. I have to sit there to tell my story, right? So you see some people who draw diagrams or write in their hand or do something in less than 10 seconds or only film things at their kitchen sink. It's like, how can you create a boundary? Because then it's an anchor, it's a branding anchor where people can say, like, oh, the realtor who talks about real estate in his shed while he's hammering.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like it's this weird ass thing, but it's a branding anchor because who else does that? And then
Totally.
they're not going to remember your name. They're going to be like, oh, Darren, they're going to be like, oh, the dude with the hammer in the shed.
That's
That's how
right.
they're going to talk about you.
You know who comes to mind? Someone you interviewed, Virginia Kerr, like a while back. I interviewed
She's
her
great.
too. She's awesome. And then she's in her laundry room all the time, right?
100%. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Or for a lot of her time anyways. But yeah, I love it. I mean, but then it goes wrong. You do all this and it's a huge failure. And in a sense, it's like you feel like no likes, no posts, no nothing. And I'm sure you've had the hits and you've had those viral
Of
pieces and then
course.
you put all those energies. How are you finding just getting back up and keeping on the horse? Because again, agents that are trying, we're not coming generally from a place of knowing this world of crazy marketing and video, but they want to get better, but then they just get beat because they're how do you change that frame to just like tell these agents just like we're trying, Heather and Darren saying you got to do more reps to find your voice and you got to put it out there, but there's probably a pretty long tail
There's a huge
benefit,
ass long tail.
right? So
Yeah.
like how are you tricking yourself through that roller coaster of the highs and lows? Anything you've learned from, again, maybe this back to the mental wellness, wellness, and just like how do you do this as us budding creators, right?
My vision is way bigger than Instagram, way bigger than social media and all these mediums. Like back to that leadership piece.
Yep.
I was put on this earth to do something and to share my message. I have a calling on my life, and you're not just a realtor. You have a calling on your life. You have a message on your heart. There's a reason that you decided to go this path and build something on your own. Maybe it's freedom. maybe your dad was in the business for a long time and you really resonate with him. There's something way bigger than you to you than these freaking algorithms and this dumb game we're playing. And so that's easier said than done, but that's why tapping in deeply to a deeper core message of what you're trying to share and that humanity piece is so important, because you can reverse engineer all day long and study all day long. You're going to have videos that flop. You're going to lose followers sometimes. You're going to get a hate message. All this stuff's going to happen. But that's not what we're doing here. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I
we're
do.
communicators, we're leaders. We're shifting something in our cities. We're helping people. We're here to add value to people's lives, right? So Instagram can go down tomorrow. That's not going to take my calling away from me.
Hmm. That's pretty powerful too. I mean, you've given a ton of little frame and reference nuggets for that. You're, I love it. Just you're calling on this back to the life transitions we're helping through that post, whether it lands or not, whether it took you an hour or 2 hours or 13 seconds to try it, it's
Yeah.
still right. Your vision is bigger. What you're trying to do and why you're doing this is deeper. That I love it. So if I were to watch your stuff, I know we're running near the end here, but are you naturally funny? Is like this just like it's just like again, your personality, people will watch, they were gonna see this and they're gonna zip over to you and they're gonna be like, man, this girl is awesome. And like, but again, you've again, it's really easy to watch. But again, I'm finding, I think, and I'm assuming what you're gonna say is we all have that some version of that in us. And it's just how you've been able to tap a bit of it and it's coming out really naturally now because you're in your heart and you're in your passion zone. Is that fair?
It's fair. I think it's hilarious that you said I'm funny, because literally my husband does not laugh at anything that I do. Like, straight face. I'll show him a video and I'm like, watch this. You know, I think I'm like really proud of myself. Like, this is the cutest line I've ever said. And he's literally like stoned. Like, not, you're not funny. Like, I'm not amused with you at
Yeah.
all.
Like
Um,
nobody's gonna like this. Yeah.
so it's so funny you said that. Um, I've really been fascinated lately. I did a reel on this. You might have seen it. The gal who does the spreadsheet thing, the Miss Excel. She
I
has a
didn't see that
million,
one.
yeah, she has a million followers, and she teaches people how to use spreadsheets.
Amazing.
And when asked how she crafts a video to go viral, she said, I put myself in the right energy state. So she does some, it's called energetics, and she works really heavily on her energy and then goes into the video. And I think that's so interesting. It sounds woo and it sounds weird, but if you think about it, think about your own human behavior. I always go back to, what's my behavior when I'm on social media? I don't traditionally follow people who have badass editing or a certain style. I follow people who, there's like this open heart where you feel like there's something energetically you're drawn to them. And it's not extroversion, because I follow some people. One of my favorite creators seems like the most quiet, meek ass person I've ever met in my life. Like, I've never, but I'm so drawn to his content because energetically he's so honest. And so I think as creators, it's a matter of figuring out, how do you get in your optimal state? And your optimal state, Darren, may be different than my optimal state. My optimal state is a little goofy and silly and bouncy. Like, that's when I feel lit up.
Yeah.
When I'm feeling that quirky Heather come out, because I'm a quirky person. But what's yours? What is your optimal state? Is it Pat Flynn? Pat Flynn puts on fuzzy socks. Did you know that? Do you know who he is?
No,
Big
but
ass content creator. Big ass. He puts on fuzzy socks and he lights a candle and he feels like really warm. And that's when his like optimal state is. So it's like, how do you put yourself in a good mood
right.
before you make content? If you're in a bad mood, don't make content, because you may be saying all the right stuff, but we're going to feel your energy.
Well, that's again, it's kind of like a morning routine. It's like if you want the day to start, you kind of got to pull your slingshot back so that you come out of the gates going. And it's like content's the same thing. If you don't do a little prep to position yourself properly. I know Tom Ferry was one of my real estate coaches, would jump on the trampolines before he'd
Mm-hmm.
go onto like a coaching call because again, it
Mm-hmm.
changes your state. So I 100% believe it. And I think a lot of realtors that are feeling almost obligated to do content just to check the box, they're forgetting that layer altogether. And that could be the one thing that changes it for them. It could,
Everything.
you know what I mean? Um, so you run a newsletter. Tell me about it. I'd love to share it to the people. So I just signed up for it because as I was doing my thing, I'm like, how do I not
Oh,
know she had a newsletter?
thanks.
So I
Thank you.
found it and now I'm on it. But tell us a little about it. Who's it for in a sense, and who would
Mhm.
benefit? And then I
That's
guess
nice.
yeah,
It's for content creators specifically, and I share a 2 to 3 minute behind the scenes video every week of something that went right and or something that went wrong.
I love it.
As so it's very open about me as a creator. One time I shared my ideas spreadsheet and I scrolled through and I showed everybody all my ideas, my misspellings, like everything in it. I've shown my scripts before. Last week I was in Costa Rica and I'm making a video and I accidentally like stepped on an iguana and cussed a little bit on the behind the scenes video. I left it in. Like it's just like kind of the unfiltered stuff. Again, I have a service-based business on the side right now that has nothing to do with what I'm doing digitally, so I have nothing to sell.
Yeah,
I just wish I had more content like that from creators I love, so I've made it.
love it. So they just go, is it just heatherparody.com? Is that where they go?
Yeah, you can go there / BTS.
Awesome. Well, that's good.
Yep.
So I'm on it now. I can't wait to kind of consume that
Yay.
as well. So, and what's next for you?
Um, what is next for me? Man, I've really lately I've been really challenging myself that I haven't really tapped into what I'm capable of. I have a lot of still narrative that I'm working through, and um, I'm shifting my business model quite a bit to give myself some more time. And it's kind of scary because my business works and it's doing well,
Right.
and I'm excited about it, but I need more space to be able to do some of the stuff I really want to do. So I'm shifting my business model quite drastically. I can't say just yet because I'm gonna have to tell a bunch of people about it, but it's going to be a huge leap of faith for me to be able to rebuild some systems to create more space in my life. Because you can make a lot of money, but if you don't have time to sit with your kids or write content and do some of the stuff that you want, man, it's like, what the hell are we doing? So that's what's next for me. You'll see some stuff in the fall, but it's kind of scary, but it's cool too. It's
And
exciting.
it's also cool you're doing that because that's a journey in itself. Again, again, realtors listening to this, we just get into the grind and it becomes a
Mm,
transaction after a transaction. And then it's
mm,
like, I know there's agents 10 years from now, they're going to do the exact same thing they're doing today. But if they would have
yeah.
thoughtfully maybe opened their mind to like what the journey you're about to go through, step back on a few things, adjusted things to allow the space, they could have created that move better, right? And it's not easy though. I think it's probably quite the journey that you're about to go through, right?
Especially when you've worked your ass off to get to a certain point.
Sure.
And, there's this narrative of like, oh, I'm quote giving something up. And that's what I mean by fighting a narrative, because that's like the fear instinct of like, oh, I'm going to give something up, as opposed to I'm going to create something new that's going to work better.
Right.
You just don't see that. It's that Indiana Jones faith jumping
Oh,
cliffs thing. So I got to practice
well,
what I preach, though.
I love it. I mean, I've loved this conversation. Thank you so much for kind of opening
Thanks,
up and spending all this
Darren.
time with me. And I know that people are going to love it. I can't wait to see what you're doing, and I'm really excited to continue watching it. So thank you again for this conversation. It's been a super blast. Any last words?
Yeah, I think what you are doing here with realtors has way more to do like with life and improving them as leaders outside of real estate. I don't know if you realize that, but I just really commend you pushing people into the creation and outside of the box and putting themselves out there, that's something that they're going to be able to take with them into any field to any levels. And it's so much more than building a business, it's about growing as a human being. So thank you for the awesome work you're doing in this world.
Amazing. Well, it's been a pleasure. I'll let you get to your kids. I got to run to mine. It's been
Those
another
kiddos.
re-education experience podcast. So have a
Yeah.
great week, everybody. Follow Heather, go find her stuff, subscribe to her stuff, report back in, and I will catch you, Heather, another time. Thank you, and everybody else
Cool.
listening.
Cool. Bye.
Bye bye.